It's great to have been invited to this event. It's also great to see what's happening in Ontario. And I guess one of my big challenges is to talk only 20 minutes about Ouranos, considering that many of the works I've seen so far is similar work that we've been doing in Quebec through a partnership approach with universities, ministries, municipalities, etc. So I only have 20 minutes. I'll try to focus much more on the way that we work, on the setups, on the partnerships, on the what's the title of the session, on the governance structure of Ouranos, and maybe help discussion about what could be done in Ontario. Well, first of all, I'd like to say that Ouranos was created because of government, municipalities, etc., that went through the science and thought that it would be useful to plan ahead of time in order, because there was climate change, etc. But that's not the truth. The reality is that those type of events that you see here happen, basically the Saguenay flood, the ice storm, but other regional events, collapse of permafrost in northern communities, Hydro-Québec having water level problems in their reservoir, coastal erosion, etc., etc. Those are really the reason why some of the stakeholders got interested in the late 90s, early 2000s into the question of climate change. So at some point they were even saying that they were getting involved into climate data only because they had to, because they didn't really want to do this, but they had to do this. So, and again, and I'll come back to the creation of Ouranos, but we keep high priority in documenting those type of events because they become very powerful then afterwards to connect with decision makers, with users, with stakeholders, and to ensure that you have a clear message that something is happening all over the place in many ways, many formats. Some decision makers were telling me that they had kind of this echo of always climate change coming all over again, so they have to do something, especially in a world where when you take one decision, it has to solve 15 problems at the same time. So I think that's important for that. So then in 2002, creation of the Ouranos Consortium. So it's based in Montreal. We have main offices in Montreal, a floor and a half of office space just in front of McGill, close to Environment Canada, Hydro-Québec, and all of our collaborators. So the setup is through 8 provincial ministries, Environment Canada, Hydro-Québec, and 4 universities that have created through a membership approach the consortium. And the idea is that they provide base funding, but they also provide personnel. So each of the organizations provide us with staff that are located in our offices in order to advance all of the science that you need between climate and adaptation. So that's quite broad, it's quite a challenge, and it's fun. So the idea, create a critical mass of expertise to ensure the development and coordination of interdisciplinary applied research and user-driven research. That was from the onset. Even the board of directors is biased towards users. There's a 50+1 user representative and 50-1 from the research community representative, and that's done on purpose. And we have 2 major programs, one on climate science and one on vulnerability, impacts, and adaptation. I'll go into a bit more detail the climate science group, but for example, in the past we have helped develop the CRCM, the regional climate model, 4th generation, and now it's operational within our organization. But we're also working with the university people on the CRCM 5, which is going to be the next generation of regional climate model, which is based, I'm not a specialist into the details, but it's based on the physics of the weather forecasting models at Environment Canada. So it allows you to have better resolution of physical processes, and makes it possible also to go to lower resolution, 10 kilometers, maybe a little bit better than that even. There's also a big vulnerability impacts and adaptation program, which I used to be in charge now and is now being in charge by Caroline Larrivée. And the general trends toward our scientific program, and I'll come back to that, is really to go more and more towards collaborative, participatory approaches, R&D project, very applied, with an increased emphasis on socio-economic analysis of adaptation options to better manage risks. So it's been a constant evolution, and one of the key, I think, aspects of the Ouranos Consortium was its ability to switch, to evolve, and to integrate more and more disciplines into its realm of activities. So our mission here is illustrated there. Our structure, the structure of organization, so we have once a year we have members that meet and they elect the board of directors, which as I was saying is somewhat biased towards users in order to ensure that the science developed really correspond to needs as much as possible. And well, of course we have a broad scientific program going from climate science to adaptation, and I'll come back what I call now the climate to adaptation continuum, and this idea of trying to consolidate the science either internally or through the universities or through our different partners to try to build the capacity to do this integrated analysis as we go along in time. So our internal role at Ouranos is really, for example, to develop the climate science. So as I was saying before, being involved in intercomparison of regional climate model. Some people might know the NARCAP initiative or the Cordex initiative that are going along. So we are involved in that. And that's more along the climate R&D aspects. But in 2007, I think we made a major move within our organization. Instead of having only one climate research program, we decided to split the climate research program and to have one program dedicated to climate research and one program dedicated to climate services, because before that we were trying to connect directly the climate scientists with policymakers, etc., and quite honestly, it didn't work. So you have to have a group that is dedicated to research to get the climate better, to get more data, more resolution, higher quality, etc. But at the other end, you probably need also people that are dedicated to climate services. They just need to provide the best data available for specific needs, whether it be someone in policy for health services or a power user like Hydro-Québec hydrologists who want as much data as possible. Also, an important point around the governance structure is that there's not only an application of users at the level of the board of directors, there's also the contributed personnel that influence the development of the technical and scientific program, and contributed experts and scientists. And as you may suspect, with respect to vulnerability, impacts, and adaptation, it's so broad a field that the role of Ouranos really in that portion of the program is really to drive a network. The network is going to do the work, to do the analysis, do the vulnerability analysis, etc., and to ensure that there is leadership, that there are project development that allows for this connection between experts, between policymakers who have certain needs but don't really know how to tackle them. So each of the programs are actually strongly oriented by program committees. So there's 11 program committees, which are composed usually of 8 to 20 representatives of the user community. So in that you have people from different ministries, so there's about 10 or 15 provincial ministries involved, Hydro-Québec, municipalities, people from the agricultural, insurance sector, watershed authorities, all kinds of groups that can be Quebec scale, regional scale, or local scale user of the information. And for example, in 2014, we had all kinds of meetings with those committees in order to establish what would be the priorities for our upcoming scientific and technical program, which is going to become operational in 2015. So Ouranos right now is starting its phase 3 of a technical program. And I'm saying this because, I don't know, there might be actually some opportunities with Ontario to try to work together on certain projects and activities. One of the nice impacts outside of Ouranos of having this structure is that at the different ministerial level within Hydro-Québec, etc., there's kind of a common understanding of the climate change adaptation issue, going from the ADM level to the manager level to the experts or the practitioner, because of this way to try to work through a network collaboration, lots of discussions, lots of meetings, unfortunately, sometimes for some, but I mean, it is complex. We need to dialogue, we need to connect, so Ouranos takes in charge many of those activities. So that's a little bit the way we try to illustrate the onion of our network. So within our facility, we have the Ouranos staff, we have some contributed staff, and we have infrastructure, office space for any collaborators who are producing a project that is within the Ouranos scientific and technical program. Of course, we work also with a much broader network. Now, this slide is saying that there's about 450 experts, etc. That was actually true around 2012, where we had about 100 projects ongoing, either in climate science, vulnerability, impacts, adaptation. Now in 2014, maybe it's a little bit down, but it will go back up again with our next phase of funding. So, I mean, I think that none of our members would actually take the time to do this, all of this networking. So it's kind of one of our key role to try to and it's part of our vision to be both a pole of innovation, of developing science that is used, that is relevant to users, but also a collaborative forum in order to make all of those different ministries, all of those different silos to actually work together as much as possible. I can tell you it's not easy sometimes, but you need a bit of psychology to do that. So very rapidly, just some of these example of results, and I'm going to present them along the continuum, the climate to adaptation continuum. So here you have a box plot of temperature and precipitation change, and I won't go into the details of all those results, but just to illustrate that the point that there's all kinds of results that have been produced, but one of the key components of those results produced is really the process behind. So most of those projects were produced by scientists in collaboration with users all along the way, from the onset of the project, in order for them to understand at the end of the day those very complex box plots that can be quite confusing if you start with a project research and then 3 years after you go and connect with these users who understand absolutely nothing of your final report. So this is an example of climate products that are produced, more complicated projects that are for power user, for example, who wanted to know what would be the number of decades that we needed to wait in order to see climate change emerge from the noise, etc. So it does allow you to make some complex analysis, but only with specific users that can handle those types of analysis. But most of the time, many of the users actually like analysis much more simpler like this one. This is a project that was used for agriculture. So trying to find the spatial analog of the climate of 2050 for the Montreal area. So, for example, the agricultural community and even some infrastructure people thought it was very nice, and they could call their colleagues in places in the US to see what are their adaptation issues, what are the type of impacts that they are witnessing right now, and try. And it's very efficient with practitioner people on the ground to try to connect with peers and to think about adaptation in a different way. And sometimes very simplistic climate products like, just general trend expected for 2100 for a specific region, etc. And all of those experiments that we've done with different type of users generated the type of guide, and I am actually quite surprised because I come here and I hear the Isabelle Charon guide being mentioned 2 times so far, so I'm quite happy, and first thing I'll do at the office is go, give a hand to Isabelle about her good work. But it's really the guide that was discussed a bit before is really about 5 to 10 years of experimenting and dialoguing with all kinds of different users and realizing that most of the time, many of the climate scientists make the mistake of trying to oversell certain type of data and undersell other type of very basic information that can allow adaptation to advance, even if the science is not fully right, etc. So I continue with some example of results. So as you can imagine, Hydro-Québec people are power users. So in this graph, a bit complex, it integrates over 100 simulation, including different global climate, regional climate model, uncertainty analysis, etc. And this was used by Hydro-Québec to, for example, to review their design of their turbines for the La Grande Dam, which is presently being refurbished. So lots of money, they want lots of data, they can spend quite a lot of time and dedication within our office to analyze the data by themselves in conjunction with the climate specialists. So that's one type of analysis that the environment within Ouranos has allowed. Other example like envelopes, ecosystem envelopes like trees that could move around or be displaced, 5 minutes, under a changing climate. So I'll very quickly zap along. The TIV protocols, so we've used David's protocol in a few communities with their help in trying to work with municipalities and infrastructure owners, energy sector, energy demand, on all kinds of examples like this. The tourism industry, which is clearly not power users of climate information, except operational people, like I know the Mont Tremblant fellow that managed the snowmaking facility, etc. All kinds of discussion, but they wanted discussion about the strategic aspect of the tourism industry in southern Quebec for the upcoming decades, and they come up with those type of more social science type of approaches to try to analyze how they should develop their adaptation strategy, etc., etc. I'm continuing, zapping very quickly. Urban heat island, you all know about this in Montreal. It was advanced quite a bit along the adaptation, trying to combat those urban heat islands. And more with time doing cost-benefit analysis. That's an ongoing cost-benefit analysis with respect to the fluctuation of water levels in the St. Lawrence. And we're using a technique of what-if scenarios because it's not clear where the water level of the St. Lawrence will go in the future. But we think that by using what-if scenarios, it already filters some of the adaptation options that might be reasonable and many others that will likely not be reasonable. So going along. What we like even more is a much more integrated perspective. And this is an example, and we've seen those type of graphs before. So we had the usual project of redoing IDF curves under a changing climate. Wow. But with time, we've coupled this with doing case studies. This is an urban area in Montreal and trying to assess what would be the concrete impacts on specific neighborhood of having climate change on impacts on IDF curves, who would be flooded, how could you manage those flooding, which type of investments and infrastructure you could do to try to maintain the level of service in order to adapt to climate change. Having again a participatory approach to find new ways, if you get only engineers in the room, you'll get engineering solutions. Whoops. So collaboration is true. You need land use planners, climate specialists, engineers, all of those people that don't necessarily come together very easily, but Ouranos trying to play this role of trying to bring all of those people together. And at the end of the day, as David was saying, actually, it transforms sometimes, and without us even knowing it sometimes, it transforms itself into norms, standards, and there's a few standards that have appeared that are now used in municipalities in Quebec. Ministry of Transportation now has been for quite a while actually adapting the IDF curves with safety margins in order to integrate climate change, etc. And they do this by themselves. We learn afterwards that they've actually done this. Coastal erosion, same thing. So very rapidly because I'm running out of time. But again, this is a fantastic project where we combine climate specialists, ocean specialists, biophysical people around erosion rates, vulnerability assessment people in a participatory approach with 3 communities. So it gets me the opportunity to go in the Magdalen Islands and Gaspé once in a while. Fantastic. And we have a major project going on with the municipalities doing cost-benefit analysis of adaptation solutions. So really trying to drive all of the players to focus in the same direction and try to maximize the use of every type of data in an objective of trying to feed adaptation. So I'll skip that because I'm late. So as I was saying, and I already said this through my presentation, it takes time. So I'm quite happy. I'm actually quite happy to have left Environment Canada and being with Ouranos since 2001, because it really got me the opportunity to invest on a long-term vision of trying to develop adaptation to climate change. And so initially it was tough only to get the network together, to operationalize an RCM. And then after that, we had to figure out this climate services versus climate R&D aspect, right, to develop adaptation case studies. Discovered that yes, of course, we were user-driven because we had a board of directors that was 50 plus 1 user, but we actually needed the users to be much more involved operationally in the development of the priorities, the projects, etc. So really the phase 2 helped us to do that. And in the phase 3, of course, we're going to try to build on success. Our big issue right now is that we don't have websites. We don't have access to data. We have been working on case study basis to try to connect, to better understand the different needs. I think the guide on the understanding scenarios is already helping us to structure what would a website could look like. But our big issue with websites, first of all, we didn't do it before because our members were telling us that it was their role to actually manage a website. The second reason is that there's many websites out there, and I think that the same problem they all have is that they don't have customer services with their website. So you get free access to the websites, but then when you need someone to actually analyze a bit the data, there's no one answering the phone. So we want to be sure that if we go with a website, we would have the capacity to actually answer the phone if people do have some question. So just very rapidly, I'm a bit late, I just wanted to highlight the fact that because I think we played a nice role with the provincial government and other users and stakeholders in creating the right environment to think about adaptation. And the Quebec government, although I'm a bit biased because I was a bit involved in this initiative, but the Quebec government has developed an adaptation strategy, and it's multi-ministerial. It's 15 ministries that got together during 2 years. They brainstormed about what would an adaptation strategy for the government should look like, and they came up with, I think, is very well integrated, pretty well thought of adaptation strategy. So within 2020, they have a specific objective to answer on 8 strategic directions to try to increase the resilience of Quebec's society. So it's true investment in mainstreaming adaptation, developing research knowledge and know-how, building awareness, modify or manage land use and manage risks, health, economy, built environment, and ecosystem biodiversity, etc. So, resources. So I've only brought one package, and I realize I left the office too quickly. It's in French. But if people want a copy, just leave me your card, and I'll send you a package. And within those packages, you have a one-pager describing every project that we've done over the last 5-6 years. So it's about 120 projects. We have a guide for municipalities to develop their first adaptation program. We just released a month ago our IPCC version of Quebec synthesis of knowledge on climate science impacts adaptation. And there's the guidebook, so I changed that last night. And there's, for example, that's an example of the Quebec government doing an atlas on the evolution of rivers in Quebec, 300 rivers that were modeled using regional climate model data, other climate model data, to try to plan for floods, for low water level in the summers, etc. And with that, I won't read it, but I'll leave you with some of the conclusion. Maybe I'll just mention the key lessons. Climate R&D versus climate services, you really need to be structured not to mix both or to try to manage both as possible. The importance of process. When I came to Ouranos, I thought that it would be all science, all reports, graphs that would be used by your users, and I realized that the process is really key in all of this. Involving users as much as possible, generating outputs and outcomes. Initially, we were strong on outputs, and we were told that we needed more outcomes, and really over the last 5-6 years we're really focusing on translating this into results, into adaptation actions, creating win-win-win situation for research, for users, for funders who actually want their money's worth of work. And sometimes you need to lead for others who should lead or who will eventually lead. And I'm saying this because the Public Safety Ministry was key in creating Ouranos, but today they're absolutely not there. It's a ministry that because of shifts in personnel, etc., is not there. But because of this consortium approach, then others take over and ensure some leadership. Ministry of Environment, Natural Resources is very dynamic. So it's nice to combine and to follow on with those type of groups, because then you can sustain the energy, even though some of the players change around and you might lose momentum. So thanks.